During the sessions. We request you to download the AIMA mobile app to participate in live polling during the event. You can download the AIMA mobile app from the Google Play Store and iTunes Store or from AIMA website www.aima.in homepage under In Focus. If you have the AIMA app installed on your Android or iOS device, then you can simply open the app and participate using the ID NMC 2015 and the password is AIMA in lowercase. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your kind attention please? May I request you all to please kindly be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to start the session, Make in India. This is plenary session 2. Make in India, realizing India's manufacturing potential is the topic of our next session, and we are privileged to have an eminent panel of speakers consisting of Mr. Atul Chaturvedi, Joint Secretary, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, Government of India, Mr. V Narendran, Managing Director, Tata Steel India and Southeast Asia, Mr. Kamal, Bali, Managing Director, Volvo India Private Limited, Mr. Tanmoy Chakrabarty, Vice President and Global Head, Government Industry Solutions Unit, Tata Consultancy Services Limited, and Mr. P. Balaji, Director, Regulatory and External Affairs, Vodafone India Limited in the session. The poll question for this session is, can India become a global hub of manufacturing? Please log on to the AIMA app or website and please participate. May I now request Mr. Tanmoy Chakrabarty to deliver the welcome address and initiate the session.
And welcome back to everyone. I have the pleasant job of moderating this session, the first session after the plenary session, which is Make in India, realizing India's manufacturing potential. And for that, we have a very impressive cross-sector representation across government, private sector, multinational focus, and somebody who can give us the regulatory perspective. So if I can have everybody settle down, then we can probably start the session since we are a little behind schedule. So just a few opening remarks for this session about the potential of India becoming a manufacturing hub, which is really what Make in India, which is the massive initiative of the government, is all about. We've had, as a trajectory in India, moved from agriculture to, traditionally countries go from agriculture to marketing to services, but we kind of took a leapfrog and moved straight away from agriculture to services, dominant economy. Whilst the share of agriculture in GDP has been falling consistently, the upside has been seen in services and not in manufacturing. Core manufacturing share of GDP has been plateauing between 18 to 20% of GDP for the last few years, and the challenge for us is to increase this not incrementally but significantly. For Indian manufacturing to progress both qualitatively and quantitatively, the transformation has to happen through the entire manufacturing ecosystem, which includes not only the large and well-known OEMs, but across the tier 1, 2, 3 suppliers, which constitute their supply chains. Many of these tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers are SMEs, and unless they grow robustly, a robust upside in Indian manufacturing sector is highly unlikely. Indian manufacturing sector has over 53 lakh manufacturing units, out of which 99% of units are employing less than 10 employees. These units are spread over 2,000 clusters all over the country. The food and beverage, textile, non-metallic mineral products, chemical products, machinery and equipment account for nearly 75% of the manufacturing units. Some of the key challenges faced by Indian MSMEs include lack of robust processes, especially in inbound and outbound logistics, inventory management, quality control, access to markets, availability of cheap capital, access to latest manufacturing equipment, machines and technologies, low ICT adoption, especially in the core manufacturing processes, subpar infrastructure, especially power, unskilled or poorly skilled workforce. Make in India coupled with Skill India are two massive national initiatives with the potential to put the Indian economy on a high growth path, and we all yearn for. Make in India has the potential to transition Indian manufacturing and make it a growth catalyst for the Indian economy. A revival in domestic consumption and a pickup of capital investments across the sectors in India, coupled with increasing factor costs impacting China manufacturing competitiveness, I think we have a window of opportunity to capitalize upon. Make in India is also a very important multifaceted initiative at the right time to kickstart Indian manufacturing. It holistically addresses the challenges of policy, complex procedures, infrastructure, and investments. From a policy and procedure perspective, there is an increased focus on simplification of regulations, end-to-end digital processes, and deregulation. From an infrastructure perspective, industrial corridors like the DMIC and the smart cities are being developed. New industrial clusters and manufacturing zones and skill development are some of the key initiatives. From a sector perspective, India's high-value industrial sectors, defense, construction, and railways are now open to global participation through enhanced FDI limits. So therefore, my couple of pointers to the panelists, and we have a very impressive panel this morning, and I will introduce each one of them as they come up to speak, is how can the government make manufacturing in India attractive for the domestic as well as foreign investors? Given India's vast demographics, we cannot afford jobless growth. The factory of the future is going to be highly futuristically automated through robotics. How do we address the conflicting challenges of high productivity in manufacturing through automation and growth in employment at the same time? How can administration, taxation, treaties be harnessed to promote manufacturing in India? How can the politics and bureaucracy be tuned for exponential growth of manufacturing in India? How can India develop its MSME to improve the supply chain and the quality of products produced? How can the successful multinationals in India promote the country as a manufacturing destination? So we have a very impressive panel, and I will begin with introducing Mr. V Narendran. He's the Managing Director of Tata Steel India and Southeast Asia. He is a very illustrious, he joined Tata Steel after finishing his MBA in 1988, and he has risen the ranks to the pole position, and I will request Mr. Narendran to give the homegrown perspective, and then we will move on to the other speakers who will give a multinational, a government, and a regulatory perspective. So thank you, and over to you, Mr. Narendran.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanmoy. Mr. Chaturvedi, Mr. Bali, Mr. Balaji, Mr. Chakrabarty, all the other distinguished members of the audience, our friends from across the borders in Pakistan and China, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. The theme of this conference is about making it happen, and I think that's very, very important. And when I looked at this theme, I was remembering something that I heard a few months back from somebody, I don't remember the name of the speaker, but he said something which stuck in my mind. And he said, leadership is about dreams and details. And I think that's a very important and a crisp way of defining what leadership is about. Because he said, you should have the dreams, otherwise you can't inspire the people who follow you to follow you. And you should have the ability to get into the details, because otherwise you can't make it happen. And if you only have the details and not the dreams, again, you're probably not a leader. So I think it's important for us to have this balance between the dreams and the details, and making it happen is about bridging that balance. So when you look at the Make in India initiative, and I think as someone in the manufacturing industry, it's something very exciting for us because after a long time, we are all talking of Make in India, and we have a government who's making a big splash about it, and I think we are really delighted about that because one thing is clear. There's no economy in the world which has made this transition from underdeveloped to developed without having a strong manufacturing sector. And even today, most developed countries have a bigger share of manufacturing in their pie than India has. So it is a journey which we necessarily need to take as a country. And if we believe that we can get to that status without having a strong manufacturing sector, we're fooling ourselves because it's not just about the jobs. Jobs are a very important part of the story. But it's also about the kind of money which is typically spent by manufacturing in R&D. It's other infrastructure issues which get tackled when you have manufacturing coming in. And most importantly, it's about jobs. So when you look at something like the Make in India program, I think we cannot but understate the importance or overstate the importance, depending on how you look at it, of the fact that there are 1 million people joining the workforce every month, right? And so there is a need for all sectors to step up because today, yes, agriculture is a shrinking part of the economy, but it still accounts for maybe 60% of the employment. So there is a need for us as we move in this journey from being an agrarian kind of economy to a developed manufacturing and services-led economy to be able to create those jobs, and that's where Make in India is important, and manufacturing is very important. But the key question is how to make it happen. It is clearly a national imperative, we all agree. And it's something that many of us in India, as industries, as companies, have been doing for some time, probably with some more impetus now, but we've been doing it. And when I make some of the comments that I make subsequently, I speak in general on behalf of the industry rather than on behalf of Tata Steel, because Tata Steel has already spent some 40,000 crores over the last 5 years in building capacities in Jharkhand and in Odisha. And we have a capital expenditure plan which is typically about 5,000 crores a year. So we are, in some sense, putting our money where the mouth is and making in India. But the comments I make is more relevant to the people you want to attract to invest in Make in India. Those of us who are already there will continue to do so. So to me, while it's a national imperative, the key point is how do you make it a business imperative? How do you make it easy for the businesses to justify it? How do you make it easy for businesses who are not in India to justify it to their boards that they have to make in India? And I think some of the points that I raised subsequently are going to address the nuances which need to be addressed, or are going to talk about the nuances which need to be addressed if we are able to make a business case out of it. So to me, I will start with the first point. The first point I want to make is, while there has been a lot of emphasis on the ease of doing business, and I would certainly compliment Mr. Amitabh Kant and Mr. Chaturvedi and the team, entire team who's been doing such a fantastic job of making it easier to do business. We also now have a statewide ranking, name and shame kind of approach, which encourages the states to move into this mold of competitive federalism, which is great. So there's a lot being done on the ease of doing business. But to make a business case out of Make in India, there is also cost of doing business which needs to be kept in mind. Because the ease of doing business is one element of it. The cost of doing business is the second element of it, and a very important element of it. There are costs which are within the control of the investors, of the manufacturing industry. There are costs which are within our gates, which is in our control. It is for us to invest in efficiency and productivity. But there are costs which are outside the gate, where the government has more control, where policies drive those costs, where the infrastructure deficits drive those costs, and where the government has a big role to play. And the point the Honorable Minister made earlier in the day about the cost of time, we don't sometimes even measure it. We just say that something is delayed by 3 months or 6 months, but if you really start measuring that cost, and particularly in capital-intensive industries, and in a country where the cost of capital is high, despite whatever has happened yesterday, we have a problem to solve. Because there is a cost of delay, there's a cost of time which adds to the cost of doing business. And unless we can tackle this cost of doing business, we are going to struggle to make a business case out of it. The next point I want to make is about opening up of trade versus opening up for investments. And sometimes we confuse both these issues. The biggest strength we have as India is that this is one of the most attractive markets in the world. We have the largest middle class, or one of the largest, or going to have the largest middle class in the world. We are certainly one of the youngest countries in the world, and will continue to be the youngest large country for at least the next 30 years. We certainly have, growth rate, which is obviously highest for all the large economies. So it is certainly a very attractive market. But how do we translate that attractive market into investments in India? And here I think the discussion and the nuance about investing in India as opposed to opening up the Indian markets is a very important one. So as industry, I'm certainly for opening up for investments. Let anybody from anywhere in the world who's interested to come and sell in India and capitalize on the opportunities provided by the market in India, let them come and invest in India, build factories in India, create jobs in India. That's why we have this Make in India campaign. So let them do that. But if we open up the markets faster than we make it easier to do business in India, and quicker than we can reduce the cost of doing business in India, you will always find investors thinking that I can always access the Indian markets without really making in India. And I think unless we solve this problem, there will be this issue. Because if it's easier to do business in some other country, and it's cheaper to make the product in some other country, and if you have the access of, let's say, zero import duty, then you will have this problem. If you look at the Indian auto industry, and all of us are proud of the Indian auto industry and what it has done over the last 20, 30 years, can you imagine an Indian auto industry if there was no import duties at all, right from the beginning? But over a period of time, we ensured that the best in the world in the automobile sector came and invested in India. There was an incentive to invest in India, face all the challenges of doing business in India, and still stay in India because the market was attractive enough. So that, to me, the speed at which you open up the country for investments should be faster, and the speed at which you make it easy to do business in India should be faster than the speed at which we open up the market for imported goods from anywhere else. And I think that's a point which we can debate, but that's a point that people like us who are in capital-intensive industries and have invested in India are concerned about. The next point I want to make, which was made earlier, is about then creating the ecosystem for it. Firstly, we don't need to make everything everywhere. So we have to decide what do we want to make, where do we want to make it. Not all states are competitive for all products. Not all states are good for manufacturing. So we have to decide which are the states which are good for manufacturing, why are they good for manufacturing, what are the factor costs which allows that. And very often when we look at a country as a geographic and a political entity, we forget the fact that if you start measuring distance in dollars and in kilometers, you'll have a very different factor cost structure. So these are things that we need to think about and decide which state is good for what manufacturing and why, and then have a plan which allows that state to promote and look for investments. Again, if I go to an auto industry example, there are clusters. Auto industry operates in clusters because you need the ecosystem of component suppliers and everyone else. So you don't want every state trying to build an auto cluster. There are a few which are already there, maybe some more need to be added. But as a country, if we want to make sure that we specialize, maybe there are some states which should focus on defense, some on metals and mining like we are in, and some in auto and things like that, some in textile, and what have you. So there is a need for us to have a focused approach on deciding what is to be produced where, rather than everyone chasing everything. And to support that, there has to be this building up of skills. And I think that was again referred to in the morning. You can't create jobs for 1 million people if they are unskilled. There has to be a process of skilling, which the government has started, but there also has to be a process whereby the industry recognizes the certification that these people get from the skilling institutes. Because if you ask someone to spend money, spend time, go through a skilling institute, but you're not going to pay him or her anything more than what you would pay an unskilled person, then there is no motivation or there is no incentive to go through the skills. So this is a part which needs to be addressed. And finally, I think there is a role for small SMEs, which is largely under utilized. I mean, we've not exploited the potential. We've always looked at SMEs as someone you need to give subsidies to. The world of manufacturing the world over lives on SMEs. The best manufacturing countries in the world have a very, very strong SME sector. No, there's no country in the world which has an SME, a strong manufacturing economy where the SMEs don't account for at least 40 to 50% of the manufacturing jobs in terms of value added, and maybe 60 to 70% of the jobs. And SMEs, it's not about being patronizing and trying to support them because they're small. It is about encouraging them to be world-class. Because these, if you look at the SMEs in Japan, Germany, Italy, they're all world-class companies. They may be small, they may have less than 500 people on their rolls, but they're dominant in the businesses that they are in. And that to me is the heart of manufacturing in any country which is strong in manufacturing. So we need to have a very different mindset to develop the SME sector. encourage them and help them become world-class in their capabilities and facilities. And what I would like the big companies, including Tata Steel and everyone else, to do is for us to leverage the fact that we are an IT powerhouse. The moderator of the session is from an IT company, from TCS, right? And we are a country which has a very, very strong IT backbone. I mean, we have a strong industry which is providing services all over the world. So how can manufacturing in India, and now there are so many things being talked about in the digital economy. In the industry parlance, it is Industry 4.0. But there's so much that can be done, leveraging the fact that we have a strong IT sector with us. And how can Indian manufacturing, particularly the larger companies, leverage that to leapfrog into what is ahead of everyone else in the manufacturing sector in the world? We don't need to follow the usual curve of having low labor cost manufacturing and then going up the ladder. Why can't we leapfrog and move on to the pole position as far as smart manufacturing is concerned? So with these, I'll conclude. I think there is a lot to do. There's a lot that has been done. I thank you for the opportunity for being able to talk to all of you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Narendran. I think you gave a very broad perspective and rendition of all the other peripheral factors that also need to be considered in a holistic manner to be able to realize the outcome of Make in India, especially I think the focus being on MSMEs really becoming niche and world-class in their output, as well as more holistic adoption of IT to be able to become not only locally competitive but globally competitive. So we will now bring in an outsider looking in perspective, and we have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Kamal Bali. He is the Managing Director of Volvo India. Volvo manufactures now in India and near Bangalore, and he of course is an IIT graduate from and joined the Aisha Group in 1981, and then has progressed in his career and has been on the board of Volvo from 2014. Mr. Bali, I think you have a presentation, so we will turn on the presentation for you, and over to you for your perspective.
Thank you, Tanmoy. Delegates on the dais, off the dais, friends from media, and very special friends from across the border. Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good morning to you all. Well, Make in India, to my mind, is one of the most important and critical initiatives of Government of India. It is going to take India to a totally different level. What I'm going to do today is spend the next 10 to 15 minutes sharing with you the genesis of Make in India and what are the factors which is going to make it a successful journey forward. So let me start with saying that we are all living in a VUCA world. We all know what is VUCA. And the next few years will continue to be marked by severe churns. Currencies and financial markets will continue to be volatile. Socio-political upheavals will continue to happen. Commodity markets may continue to remain in a state of turmoil. Unpredictable consumer reactions in the new digital world. Unfortunate continuing of facets of terrorism and genocide. Focus on climate change, inclusion, and sustainability is going to become very, very important. And there's going to be increased demands on job security globally. This is very, very true. However, despite global headwinds, India has started to see some very positive indicators, but still we have a lot of catching up to do. As we all know, we're the second largest country, accounting for almost 17% of civilization, but only 9th in our GDP size, with amongst the lowest per capita GDP amongst large countries. The government has done much in the last 15 months. Post the Make in India launch in September, there has been a 48% increase in FDI from the period October to April this year. Credit ratings are seeing an upward trend. We have become the hottest destination in 2015 ahead of China and US. But on ground, we need much more. 1 million new jobs a month. It's not a joke. 1 million new jobs a month, which can happen only with manufacturing, tourism, infra, and new skills. Monsoon has been better. Government collections have been good in the first quarter of this financial year. We see good prospects for further private investments. Yesterday's positive news of 50 bips reduction, bringing the repo rate down to about 6.5 is probably the lowest in the last 5 years. This should also help fuel growth. We can be more bullish on growth estimates for FY16. I'm very sure on that. However, there have been a couple of very serious dampeners. The unfortunate logjam in Parliament has hampered the passage of the most important bill to my mind in the history of independent India, which is the GST bill. And this is really, really a sad thing. And this is going to be a very, very important imperative going forward. Let's take a look at our per capita GDP numbers, just to paint a small picture for you. We have a GDP of $2,100 billion, population of 1.25 billion. 60% of our population is rural, which accounts for 750 million people, and 40% is urban. But look at the GDP per capita. For the rural, we have just about 2.5 thousand rupees per month. And the per capita for the urban areas is about 19,000 rupees a month. Overall, India picture is 9,000 rupees per month. So this is one of the biggest challenges India faces. Look at our demographics. As per certain estimates, by the year 2022, we're likely to have a population of 130 crores. Of this, 80 crores would be the working population in the range of 16 to 59. Non-working population of about 50 crores. Of this, with the current estimates, as per our education and skilling programs, we are likely to have only 33 crore skilled labor, which is 40%, and almost 47 crore is likely to be unskilled or unusable. So I think that's another very important parameter. In the morning, Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal talked about this. So this is a huge demographic dividend, but it can become a demographic nightmare if not tackled properly. So we will have to bring about a paradigm shift in skilling and education missions. Let's come to the compelling purpose now. I think it's very clear we have on our hands one of the biggest issues of taking 400 million people, vulnerable people, out of extreme poverty. The only way forward, to my mind, there is no other recipe, is creating jobs, skilling them, and making them employable. And how do we do this? We have to have a convergence of all stakeholders, irrespective of ideologies and political affiliations, to put their stated differences on the back burner, at least for once, to realize the single-minded purpose that manufacturing is good for a much bigger purpose. Manufacturing is not to look at GDP numbers. Manufacturing is to provide those jobs. Trust needs to be a currency, which is lacking today. Else, we could be staring at a demographic nightmare. That's very, very important. In any case, we will have to demonstrate the courage and the political will to cut the threads which are holding us down. And I think that's very, very important. That's the message which we think, because our chance is now. You have great leadership. You have a great DIPP. You have Mr. Kant. You have Mr. Chaturvedi. You have some of the best peoples available who can drive this journey for us. Make in India is the answer. Make in India can ignite the virtuous cycle of growth. Let's look at the most critical imperative for India. Inclusive growth through job creation. We got to create 10 to 12 million jobs every year. How do we do it? First, accelerate economic activity. More manufacturing, more MSMEs into the ecosystem, higher order value capture in India. That's very important, and that is what was lacking in the 1991 reforms. While the economy was opened from outside to inside, but our domestic reforms were painfully slow. The domestic industry could not come up to that level. So you had a relatively large amount of jobless growth. So I think that's very, very important to understand. Second is center and state's political will to improve ease of doing business. We got to cut the red tape, encourage private sector, sort out land issues, regulatory framework, And GST, to my mind,